are for any athlete, and all of these strategies we will be discussing will be for pretty much anyone, and we're all kind of athletes in a certain way. So, my name's Ryan Hawkins. I'm a naturopath. I'm also a certified international trainer, certified physical preparation specialist. And I'm here mostly to introduce Dr. Bob and to translate if anyone has any questions, mediate a little bit. And I'm also a good connection. If you guys need more information from Dr. Bob or you want to learn more about nutrition, me and him are there for that. And we're just here to help you guys perform at your best. So Dr. Bob is a longtime friend and a mentor. He is a chiropractic doctor, a certified clinical nutritionist. Are you still a diplomate?
I am. Oh yeah, once a diplomate, always a diplomate. You
Yeah,
don't lose that,
diplomate.
even though I do need to recertify. But yeah, I'm a board certified teaching diplomate, American Board of Clinical
Yeah.
Nutrition, International Board Applied Kinesiology.
Yeah. So he's done all of those things, and he's also worked with tons of the most high level athletes in, as you can see, different domains, different sports, from very intense, very quick, very power oriented to more endurance, speed running to boxing to the NBA, and to the NFL. So he knows the human body, he knows nutrition, he knows how to optimize human performance, and I think we're going to get a lot out of this tonight from Dr. Bob, and I really, really do appreciate him. He's always been there and helping me out, and I'm glad to have him help me out here tonight.
Well, Ryan, thank you. And my favorite topic is certainly health. It's human performance, and the brain is a big part of that. Part of what I've done is I've taught doctors all over the world for over 30 years. So in this lecture, and by the way, I recorded this as a public service announcement. This lecture was about cancer, and it was entitled "The $1 Trillion Mistake." And reality is, Deepak Chopra said this: more people will die, will make a living off of cancer than will ever die from it. And we're seeing a lot of changes in health, including better realizations about how to enhance athletic performance, how to enhance the brain. And I'm going to go with Yogi Berra for a moment. This guy was really quite funny. And, he wasn't a math major, but here's what he said: baseball is 90% mental, the other half is physical. And, when I talk to my elite athletes and I ask them the question, how much of your sport is mental? 90% is the number one answer that I get back. And in fact, I even videotaped one of the Buffalo Bills who's in the playoffs now. And I asked him how much of the game is mental. He said, Bob, it's 100% mental. And I said, come on, it can't be 100%. He says, Bob, at this level, everybody can play. The thing that's going to, the difference between a winner or a loser, someone who plays, someone who sits the bench, someone who's out of the league, is what's going on between their ears. If you can focus, if you can concentrate, then you can bring your A game and you can succeed. So this is a picture of Mike Webster. He played for the Pittsburgh Steelers for, I think it was 18 different seasons. He won 4 Super Bowls. He was featured in the movie Concussion. And there was Mike on the left in his playing days, and there was his character in the movie on the viewing right. And this wasn't his brain, but this is what happened to his brain. They had to create a new diagnosis. CTE stands for chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Lots of big words, but basically the brain was injured and inflamed and damaged for so long that scar tissue literally shrunk down and compressed off the structure and function of the brain. I'm going to talk about a few ways of making the brain better. Ryan is very familiar with my favorite herb for the brain, which is called Ganoderma lucidum. And it's going to be important to mention this, and I'm going to share a couple different case studies. I put all of my athletes on it. It's great for focus. It's great for circulation. It's great for inflammation. It alkalizes. But when it comes to brain injury, part of what it does is it breaks down the plaquing, the scarring that occurs after a brain or head injury. And so here's an interesting picture. They took rats, and I'm not in favor of injuring an animal, even for purpose of experimentation, but they gave rats a controlled concussion. And one group got the nutrients that we're describing, like Ganoderma lucidum. The other group got nothing. At 21 days, they did an autopsy. They sacrificed the animals. They did an autopsy, and on the left was the brain of the animals that weren't treated, and on the right were the animals that were treated. It looked like about a 95% reduction in the plaquing in just 21 days. So there's a picture of Michael Morris pretty famous guy. Evan Holyfield happens to be Evander Holyfield's son there. He was in the office on that day. But if you look at Michael, you look at the right side of his head, that's a very interesting scar. You look at the left side, that's an interesting scar. Michael had a traumatic brain injury and was literally supposed to die. They invited his kids into the hospital and they said, hey, say goodbye to your dad. He's not going to live through the night. But I have a video of Michael, and he says that 21 days he felt good enough to jog home from the hospital, and at 6 months even made a full mental recovery, and he wasn't even supposed to be functional at all. And this wasn't the exact companies that I used, but this is what's available in Canada. I did hourly doses of something called theanine. And for people that want the details, that's actually calms the brain. It's what's called a GABA facilitator. And when the brain is inflamed, there's a neurotransmitter that can actually damage the brain called glutamate. So GABA buffers that. PRM Resolve is an advanced form of omega 3, which is very good at modulating the inflammatory process and promoting healing. The Nutrizyme, the proteolytic enzymes, those are good at digesting scar tissue. And then finally, the Ganoderma spores. And I'm going to talk to them about them again and again. But if someone has a concussion, I like them doing hourly doses. And I mean every waking hour of all four of these for at least 7 days, and sometimes as much as 21. That's what we put Michael Morris on a protocol after he got out of the hospital. But we had him on a pretty good protocol before he got in, and that's how he beat it. I don't know how many people have read Stephen Kotler, but he wrote the book, The Rise of Superman. That's the first book I read from him. And this most recent book was called The Art of Impossible. And he's even one that has a Peak Performance Institute. And he studies this concept of flow. And, these athletes, these extreme athletes, and you're seeing a bunch of them on snowboards and getting dropped out of helicopters and swishing down mountains, things that they thought were impossible before, but now they're doing them routine. And flow is when your body and brain and chemistry and challenge are all aligned in a way where you're stretching your limits, you're improving, you're enjoying the process, and you have to be totally focused and engaged to be in that state. Now, that doesn't have to be a state of athleticism, or it doesn't have to be athletics that drive you in the flow state. It could be business, it could be music, it could be study. There's so many, it could even just be your relationships. So many different things can get you in flow, but there's a brain chemistry of flow. And the brain chemicals are norepinephrine, dopamine, anandamide, serotonin, endorphins, and oxytocin. And actually, this might sound strange, but chocolate, believe it or not, stimulates all of the neurotransmitters of flow. And I think that's why people really, really like it. This particular chocolate is infused with reishi mushroom, all organic reishi mushroom, certified clean, really, really good choice. And if people don't like mocha, the hot chocolate could get them in a flow state. So when I talk about performance nutrition, I talk about the top 5 needs of the athlete. And it's probably in this order. Focus, you got to have your brain there to get your body in a position to succeed. Fuel, you got to have energy. Acid buffers, especially the really, really strong athletes, they generate a lot of acid. And if you don't buffer that, it will slow them down. Controlling the inflammatory process, and then finally, recovery. So Lanny Basham was an Olympic gold medalist, and he wrote the book with winning in mind. And he asked a very interesting question. He said, if high level competition is mostly mental, should you spend time on mental training? And he was fully committed to that concept. And that's how he trained his athletes that also won Olympic medals. But the mental training should be part of it. And this is a fun Olympic snowboarder. And she used a tool that Ryan and I are both familiar with called NeuroTracker. They use it in the NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball, the military. It's used in business. It's used in concussion clinics. It literally can train the brain, improve focus, and even accelerate concussion recovery. Previously, that was $100 per session in concussion clinics. You now can get a home version if you're interested in that type of training to improve your brain function. And again, Ganoderma lucem, a big part of what I'm going to talk about for the brain and body health. I taught a series in 2009 with a neurologist from Cornell. And what we would teach people around the world, doctors around the world, is that the brain is the most nutrient dependent, energy dependent, stress vulnerable, toxin vulnerable organ. And therefore, we've got to have all those things in check if our brain is going to work optimally. Andrew Huberman, he's a big fan of coffee. And right now, reishi infused coffee is one of the top trends out there in terms of substance. And reishi, also known as Ganoderma lucidum, has the same intensity of calming effect as the drug Valium, but without the downside. When it comes to fuel, David Katz, I co-lectured with him at a major conference in 2015, and he was trying to change how labels were put on food. He wanted to put a green sticker, a yellow sticker, and a red sticker. Green, get as much as you want. Red, don't do it except for very, very minimally. Yellow, proceed with caution. And oddly enough, he couldn't get anybody in Congress to agree with that because they said, look, no one's going to agree what should be red, what should be yellow, what should be green. But here's a simple rule. If God made it, it's okay. If man made it, stay away. But here's one of the things that he said. He said that kids today are more harmed by what they're eating than drugs, alcohol, gangs, and other things like that. The journal Advances in Therapy, they took tissue samples from people, age matched, health matched, 25 to 30, good athletes. One group got a really good diet. The other group got diet and supplementation. After a few months, they went back in the tissue and they realized that the best diet could not improve the nutrient status. So, Ryan, did you raise your hand? Do you?
Yeah, I think that's a super interesting concept because even today I had two parents that eat fully organic. They hunt and they were in my office and they were there with their son who's a high level swimmer and they were really questioning my thoughts on why if supplementation was really necessary. And I really wanted to see what you had to say when that study itself proves it. But have you seen that with athletes that you try and eat a perfect diet, you try and eat completely wild, all organic? What about that context? Does that change your thoughts, or it's still not enough?
It's not enough, Ryan. So, it was about 100 years ago that scientists figured out that they could grow big plants with only three elements: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So that's the top fertilizer in the world. But it takes 30 minerals, 30 elements to make healthy plants, animals, and humans. So if you pull three out for every 30, or sorry, if you pull 30 out for every three that you put back in, eventually you have a problem. And that's where the world is right now. Even CIA.gov recognizes that. The Global Nutrition Report actually says, the top cause of death on the planet for decades running now is malnutrition. Every year it's number one. In 2020, malnutrition was responsible for 60% of the deaths on the globe. Now, think about that for a moment. Something simple like vitamin D status. When people had good vitamin D status, they didn't have any problem with COVID. When they had very low vitamin D, that was something that predicted that they would likely go in the hospital, get intubated, and or even die. If they had low vitamin D and other things going on with their body, they were in trouble. But vitamin D is just one of the fabulous 50, the vitamins, minerals, amino acids, proteins, carbohydrates, fat, fiber, and water that we need on a regular basis. So, parents, one, I love that you're taking good care of your kids, but hey, right now, supplementation is absolutely essential if people want to be their best and their healthiest and live the longest. So whoever, Ryan, whoever's taking people to you, they're obviously ahead of the game. If they're got their kids doing good training and eating organic, that's a great start. But if they want to be their best, they're going to have to supplement. So Ganoderma does have all the fabulous 50, way more magnesium than broccoli, vitamin C than oranges, calcium than milk, omega-3 than tuna, protein than beans, more antioxidants than berries, and berries are very, very high, even more iron than spinach. When we start looking at acid-alkaline balance, I read a book years ago called Alkalize or Die, and it's absolutely accurate. If we start accumulating biologic acid, it slows down all of our processes, and then ultimately we can die. I always like to be on the positive side. So rather than alkalize or die, I say alkalize and thrive. This is a European journal. And Ryan, for the parents, this PubMed ID or anybody that wants to look it up, If you were to tuck that into your Google search engine, you can find the PubMed article. PubMed is the National Library of Medicine, National Institutes of Health database. But very, very simply, this article was talking about the progressive accumulation of acid. They're calling it metabolic acidosis. And they're saying that you just can't undo it with food. You've got to have a supplement program to undo that. So, an alkaline diet would be mostly fruits, vegetables, even lean meats. You start looking at amino acids, those are fairly neutral, not strong acids. Fatty acids, same thing. When you're eating good natural foods, unprocessed foods, that's basically going to be alkalizing. And there's so many benefits the athlete might consider about muscle mass most of all. You start talking about longevity, it reduces the probability of cancer and even reduces the probability of metastasis. So, alkaline diet critical for all of us, especially athletes and cancer patients. What I'm showing on the screen there, my first degree is electrical engineering, so I'm very comfortable with graphs, but that's a speed graph of an Olympic sprinter. And he hit a peak speed at about 60 meters and then slowed down. So the first 3 seconds of energy production is basically stored ATP. And then there's something called creatine phosphate that gets kicked in. After that, you start making lactic acid. And lactic acid is such a strong acid that it will slow you down. So that's me and Tyson Gay. And there he is in that actual race, beating Usain Bolt in the 100 meters at the World Championship. So Tyson actually signed $1 million endorsement before his sweat dried. So fun to work with those levels of athletes. And the biggest thing we did with Tyson was actually alkalize his system. So the hourly doses of Ganoderma lucidum. When you start looking at inflammation, Time magazine called it the secret killer. That's inflammation that exists below the threshold of pain. When we train, when we snowboard, when we exercise, we're going to develop some level of inflammation. And if our aches and pains are lasting longer than they should, or if our energy is not where it should be, we likely have more inflammation than is healthy. So, by more than a dozen different mechanisms, Ganoderma will reduce the inflammatory process. And then finally, recovery. You want to train hard and rest hard. Tom Brady, LeBron James, Michael Phelps, they all prioritized sleep. And in fact, Charles Poliquin, the most famous or at least successful strength and conditioning coach, said, nothing gets you more bang for your buck than sleep. Stanford did a study a few decades ago. They had their athletes spend 10 hours a night in bed in a dark, quiet room. They didn't sleep all 10 hours, but even if they just rested that much, they improved their first serve by 16%. So any athlete that's competing knows that sleep is critical. When you're well rested, you perform better. And back to Ganoderma, people that consume it fall asleep faster, sleep deeper longer, and wake up more refreshed. So for the athletes, we want focus, we want fuel, we want to buffer the acid, we want to control the inflammation, we want to recover. When we want to get in the optimal state of performance, we get into the optimal flow chemistry. And interestingly enough, Stephen Kotler has been studying this now for decades, and they've defined how to get there. So for flow nutrition, chocolate enhances all the flow states, reishi mushroom enhances it even more. And if there happens to be a concussion, theanine, the resolving form of omega-3, proteolytic enzymes, and Ganoderma spores, absolutely proven protocol, even for very severe brain injuries that, in theory could have killed people. People have recovered beautifully from that. So that will finish the slides that I had. Ryan, you want to make any comments, or shall we open it up for questions?
Well, I would like to make a few comments. The first is like I've learned from you for a very long time. I listened to all your audios. I've been Dr. Bob, for those of you that don't know me, or who will listen to it later. Pour ceux qui me connaissent pas, Dr. Bob m'a invité à plein de ses cours pour aucune, tu sais, j'y ai pas payé pour aucune raison. J'ai rien fait pour cet homme-là. He invited me for no good reason. I hadn't given him any money. He offered me a ton of free help to get my career started. And just because he's a great person. And I then went and studied with Charles Poliquin himself, who we mentioned earlier, one of the probably best coaches in strength training that ever existed. I think he had over 140 athletes medaled at the end of his career. And I studied it with many other people in nutrition and did my naturopathy degree, other degrees in nutrition, and I've never seen anybody else get as incredible results as you have. I've seen other people talk about some of these top performing things. But one of the things that I get a lot of pushback on from a lot of people, especially because of this Huberman podcast, who he's a brilliant man, Andrew Huberman. But I get a lot of blowback from one of the things, and I still use it, and I've used it recently, and I'm probably going to do it again this summer, is your alkalizing protocol. And I've talked to you about this many times over the years, and I just like to restate it and rehear about it. You know, there's people that kind of poo-poo on it. There's people that kind of believe in it. What's your thoughts on that now?
Well, Ryan, I've used it for 33 years in clinical practice with every range of patient you could, right? So when my cancer patients are dying and we alkalize them, hey, that is what some of them need to suddenly survive, so it can be life-saving on that extreme end. And when I showed that picture of Tyson Gay beating Usain Bolt, it was alkalizing him that made the biggest difference. I think about
Yeah.
Evander Holyfield in the 90s. His complaint was that he would get big cramps at the end of a fight. When you're acid, you get muscle cramps. You're not energy efficient. We alkalized him, and I ended up treating him for 10 years and multiple members of his family. So, Huberman, smart guy. I don't think he's treating patients. I mean, he's at Stanford.
Oh, he's not a
Stanford's really
clinician, right?
yeah, Stanford's taken a big hit over these last years. Hey, we can disagree on a few things, and I still think he's a really smart guy. But you can't argue that the literature talks about the problem with acid alkaline and has for over 75 years. We
Yep.
know as you accumulate acid, your body becomes inefficient, and a lot of things can happen. And even look at the medical benefits of the alkaline diet. All those things are in PubMed. So Huberman's
Yep.
smart guy, but if he's not promoting acid alkaline, alkalizing, then he's missing a big part of what health is all about.
There's a few good questions here. Did you want me to read one or two of them to you?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so thank you for writing your questions. Cal Frederic wrote in. Thanks for being here, Cal. Uh, I'll say it in English and I'll also say it in French. Would you consider a non-gluten diet something to consider for concussion recovery? Est-ce que tu considérais un diète faible en gluten quelque chose à considérer dans la récupération d'une commotion? So yeah, would you consider that?
You know, uh, Gluten in and of itself is not a poison, but there's so many people that have problems with gluten in this part of the world because it's genetically modified. Celiac disease, which is a gluten issue, has gone up by more than 400% since they genetically modified gluten. So I, as a general rule, recommend gluten-free and dairy-free for everybody. And those people that tolerate it, they can have doses now and then, but always use really clean sources. In the States, there's an enzyme product called Glutenza, and it's a series of enzymes that literally breaks down gluten into individual amino acids. So even if people are gluten sensitive, they don't react to it. But yes, gluten free is part of my concussion recovery protocol. And I really recommend it for everybody, especially in this part of the world.
Awesome. Awesome. The next question, Mary, in French, it would say, est-ce qu'il y a un âge minimum pour des suppléments? Est-ce que mon enfant de 11 ans sera trop jeune? Is there a minimum age to give supplements to a kid? Is an 11-year-old too young to take them?
Well, I've got five granddaughters and my sixth on the way, and they all take supplements. So now the youngest that's still nursing, she gets it through mother's milk. And really, my daughter-in-law were taking supplements when they conceived. So they were all getting supplements all the way through conception, through delivery, through their entire life. So the nice thing about nutrition, and I'll use a phrase, vitamin toxicity. I was at a conference and they said that's an oxymoron. People don't die from too many vitamins; they die from too few. And theoretically it's possible, but you're not going to
I've
get
never
too many
seen it.
vitamins. Yeah, I haven't either. So
Um, yeah. And I've seen your kids. So, for those who are here, pour ceux qui sont ici, moi, j'ai vu souvent au moins un des enfants de Dr. Bob. I've seen one of the kids. Um, his son. His son is an incredible human, incredible athlete. He's about what, 5'7", your son? Five foot
Yeah,
eight, maybe?
five
And
seven.
he dunks.
Yeah.
He dunks, does he not? He's an
He,
incredible athlete. I saw him do one arm chin ups. He's successful. He has a wonderful wife, a good kid. Like he's a well-rounded human, and he's been getting supplements since I think you gave him one of the most powerful supplements I know in his formula bottle. Almost.
oh,
He
we
was
we
breastfeeding, but I think
well,
you
he didn't get
or
formula. We did mix supplements and shakes in goat's milk when we started doing that. No, no,
that's what I meant. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
formula is a disaster. All my kids got supplements as soon as they could take them. One of the first things they got out of a sippy cup was a healthy shake. That was
Yeah.
essentially a medical food. So to promote detox or modulating inflammation. So start early. Malnutrition is the top killer on the planet. If we nourish people better, they perform better, they prevent problems, and hopefully live better longer.
So, I know a very beautiful person that asked a question. Camille Breton Skagen asked if she can give Ganoderma to her kid. Her kid is 5.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So there's even pregnant women can take it. And again, my daughter-in-law who's nursing a 6-month-old, she consumes it daily. So so her daughter is getting it in breast milk.
Awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, I don't really have, oh, I would have, what would you do to alkalize? I know you do Ganoderma, but do you do anything else now, Dr. Bob? There's
Yeah.
other things that are on the market now. What do you do to alkalize?
Lots of plant nutrient supplements. So there's one called Dynamic Fruits and Greens, which is 20 different organic fruits and vegetables all in one powder that actually tastes pretty good from Nutridyne. I'll have people take a dose every waking hour. Nutritional Frontiers isn't in Canada. They've got some really good greens. Numedica, they might be in Canada now, and they've got some really good greens. So, but it's basically plant nutrients and minerals that alkalize.
Yeah. And there's this concept that, for those who do believe in that, what are your thoughts on meat and, acid in the diet? What is your thoughts on that for those athletes out there that are hearing maybe they shouldn't eat meat or acidifying foods?
Well, if I put a steak on my table, it's not going to burn a hole in it, right? But if I put a drop of hydrochloric acid from my stomach, it will. So the acids, amino acids, fatty acids are not very strong acids. And there's an article about food and supplements and acid alkaline. And one of the things that it talks about very, very simply is that food contributes very little to the acid burden, but it is how we build our buffers. And so, if you're eating good proteins, good vegetables, you're going to be fine. But even just straight up meat, you look at Jordan Peterson, is he 6 or 7 straight years on carnivore and his daughter even longer than that? And they're thriving. We're not carnivores, but we're omnivores. We need good animal protein. If you get good quality protein, it serves your body well. If you don't get good protein, you have a problem.
Yeah, okay. So we actually there's a good question from Mary. She actually asked a question on a specific food. What are your general thoughts on eggs, given they are acidic?
I like eggs. I like eggs a lot. You get it from a healthy animal.
I think, yeah,
Yeah.
I know a lot of kids. And you can maybe comment on this after on how hard it is sometimes to nourish kids and what you've seen with your own kids and what you do in your practice. Because even my kid, who's right there, sometimes I have trouble getting her to eat healthy food, but it's one of the only proteins sometimes that kids will take willingly.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of debate about that it's starting to be a subject that is a little bit less taboo, eggs. People are starting to realize that it was kind of, but what are your thoughts on the cholesterol? What are your thoughts on the acid?
Well, first of all, cholesterol is a non-issue, and so there's a guy that's come into the limelight over the last couple of years. His name is Gary Brecka. He's got 10x Health with Grant Cardone. Used to work for the insurance industry. He was an actuary. He would predict when people would die, and he says in his decades of doing that, he never once saw anybody that was over 100 that didn't have high cholesterol. They have to get to be 100, you need high cholesterol. That's almost what he's implying there. British Medical Journal published an article in 2020 for 92% of people over the age of 60, high cholesterol is associated with longevity. So forget about the cholesterol issue. Now, if you have a healthy animal creating a healthy egg, I mean, that's everything that's needed for life. Now, if it's not a healthy animal creating a healthy egg, I wouldn't eat it. But I mean, if you've got a really clear white and a very, very yellow orange yolk, those great omega-3 eggs, from those healthy animals, eat as much as you want. There would be very few people that would need to
Awesome.
minimize eggs.
Awesome. Awesome. Um, there is il y a un personne qui m'a demandé une question, so there was one person that asked me a question, so I'll ask it in French for them and English, and if they have a problem with the answer, I know that I can translate it for them. But I know I've personally had this experience. I got COVID, I had anxiety, and I've gotten all my medications, or pretty close to. And with your help and other people's, and resilience on my part, but one of those medications was giving me a hard time with cardio. Now I got COVID, and I since that time have noticed that my performance in the gym is much more difficult. If I go for longer series in weight training, over 40 seconds, my acid just creeps up like crazy. And cardio, what I used to do with a 30-pound weight, I used to ruck a lot of stuff up mountains and with 30 pounds on my back, and I'd be beating people with nothing all the time. And now I'm out of breath doing the same thing. And what are your thoughts on long COVID versus can it impact that? Have you seen that? And I've had a few clients who are suffering from it, and one of them wanted me to ask.
One of the more recent stats, a couple of years ago, it was 1 in 5 people that had COVID had long COVID. Now they think it's 1 in 8. But so there's ways, the way the COVID receptor binds, it's something called the spike protein binds to something called the ACE2 receptor, but nicotine also binds to that. So there's a published article that if they give people a very low dose nicotine patch, the smallest nicotine patch you can get is 7 milligrams. You cut it in half, you put 3.5 milligram nicotine patch on, change it out every 24 hours. Nicotine binds to the same receptors as spike protein, but 30 times stronger. So it will displace the spike protein. And then the enzymes that I showed in the concussion protocol, the
Yeah,
proteolytic enzymes will digest the spike proteins. And some people notice improvements within a day or two, and some people have total resolution fast. So it doesn't have to be a nicotine
that's
patch.
crazy. You
Yeah.
just taught me something you're always that's nuts. Okay,
Well, ginkgo
awesome.
will displace it. So will lobelia. Ryan, I've got a video. I've got a YouTube video on long COVID. So let me put it in the chat because I go through the protocol of what to do about it. So,
That's so crazy. And I've been studying nicotine because I really dived into the brain with Datsis Karazian. I did a few of his courses. And when I got, anxiety and with my mom's suicide, I really got into the brain and brain health and everything, right? And I've been studying nicotine lately and its effects on longevity and reducing Alzheimer risk and things like that. Most people think it's very bad for you, but there's some benefits to very low dose nicotine once in a while, from what I'm understanding. And that's the first time I hear about it for COVID.
yeah, there absolutely is. So, nicotine is a perfectly good herb. And I was listening to something the other week, a podcast, and they were talking about nicotine isn't the problem with cigarettes, it's all the other chemicals that they put in there. So, and by the way, I'll put the link to long COVID, that nicotine reference in the chat. It's there now for that YouTube video.
That's
Um,
awesome. Thank you
you
so
are very
much.
welcome.
Well, I haven't seen any other questions really creep in. I could ask you questions all night, but I won't do that. You have a busy life and you got family and everything, and you took time out of your life for me. So thanks. I'm going to thank you on the behalf of Maximize, on the behalf of all the athletes that may watch this in the future or are watching it right now, or the parents that I know two parents are going to be very grateful. One kid at the mountain got a very bad concussion last week.
Ooh.
So thank you so much for taking the time, and I hope to see you soon.
I hope so too. And Mary says thank you as well. Mary, you are very welcome. And let's take good care of whoever got the concussion. If I can help anyway, let me know.
I will, and we might connect on that. So thank you.
You're very welcome. All right. Well, good night, all,
Take it easy.
and God
Oh,
bless.
send me the link.
It's in the chat. Do you want me to put it in?
No, no, no. I meant for this talk.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll load it up and I'll send you the link. You got it. All righty.
Thanks, man.
You're welcome. Bye for now.
Bye for now.